I know it didn't look the greatest, but did anybody else notice that some of SMU's problems at the start of the game are pretty fixable?
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, they are fixable, and I'm gonna tell you why here in just a second. Welcome to another week of Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. SMU defeats Missouri State 28-10, and we'll break it down here in just a second after I tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. So download the FanDuel app today. Coming up on today's show, we will talk about some of the bad that popped up against Missouri State and why this SMU team is so undisciplined. We'll also talk about the fallout from this win. And yes, there was fallout because SMU shifted further away from getting itself back into the top 25, setting up a hugely pivotal matchup against TCU before we go in to conference play. But let me go ahead and start with this. It is about how you finish a lot of times. And last week against Baylor, SMU didn't finish well. This week against Missouri State, I think it was a lot better. But before I get to that, the start for SMU wasn't good. But a lot of the stuff I think is fixable. To me, the start against Missouri State, had more to do with the defense kind of wasn't awake and it got put into an adverse situation. I think we can excuse or look beyond that a little bit. But especially on the offensive side of things, because you had the Kevin Jennings interception and you had the Romello Brinson fumble on the first two drives of the game. And I think those are fixable. One, the Jennings interception. All you got to do is go back and watch film and find out, okay, probably shouldn't have made that throw. Double covered. There really wasn't even a window to try to fit that in there to Jalen Cooper. There was no need to make that throw. And a simple film study and a simple, okay, that's not one that needs to be made. There's probably a better play out there. Can fix that. Number two, Romello Brinson just dropped the ball switching hands. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that a dude who has made catch after catch after catch, big play after big play, contested catch after contested catch this season isn't going to do that again. That's just where I'm going to lean on that. So when I look at those two mistakes, I just don't think that those are symptoms of something that's going to last the entirety of the season. Will Kevin Jennings throw more interceptions? Possibly. But I don't think he's going to be doing that necessarily. And yes, there's some carryover from last year where, inaccurate with reads, inaccurate with throws, or throwing the ball where it shouldn't be thrown. But I just think that if you go back into the film room and say, look, here's what was happening, here's something that's happening over here or over there, I'm going to give Jennings the benefit of the doubt because he's a smart dude and because he's coachable. And I think they can coach that out of him because that's just a play that's not there. It shouldn't have been made. Move on. Now to the rest of the game, though. If you take the first quarter out of it, SMU outscores Missouri State 28-0. This was SMU's drives the rest of the way after the first quarter. So beginning in the second quarter, SMU punts on a 42-yard drive, then scores a touchdown on a 12-play, 73-yard drive, scores another touchdown a minute 19 before the half. Then punt to begin the third quarter after a 6-play drive, score a touchdown. Third quarter ends. Touchdown, and then a couple of punts, but at that point, you're really just trying to make it to the finish line. But SMU on the day, in totality, totaled up 448 yards of total offense. 167 more on the ground. By the way, 5 yards per carry. Now, there was a lot that makes you feel uneasy about this SMU team, sure, but their formula for winning still remains. And the way they finished the game, I think, epitomizes that. run the ball and run it efficiently. Not just effectively, but efficiently. Kevin Jennings moving the ball down the field, spreading it out to an array of receivers. Jalen Cooper had another good game, 5 for 68. Romello Brinson chipped in as well. RJ Maryland caught his first touchdown of the season. And then defensively as well, you got 5 sacks, 9 total tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions. If you take the first quarter out of it, SMU is established. Here's what we can't expect. We cannot expect, no matter who the team is, that SMU is just going to try to purposefully make games track meets. They're not going to be a high-scoring, 40-point, 35-point per game team because they don't call the game like that. That's just not how it's going to be. But if you take the first quarter out of it, SMU was pretty dominant. The only thing that got in SMU's way was all the damn penalties. But Missouri State didn't really hang with SMU outside of the first quarter when SMU's turnovers made it easier for Missouri State to get points. And by the way, Missouri State, credit to them, threw the ball pretty well in that opening quarter. But after that, when it seemed like SMU woke up and realized, hey, we got a football game to play, it was lights out from there. So the finish was very well. And when you look at the finished product of the game, you could say, okay, this is a winning formula. Because how many teams are going to stop you when you run for 5 yards a carry? And this wasn't the only game because they did so against Baylor as well. The top 2 leading rushers, TJ Harden and Chris Johnson Jr., 6.1 yards per carry, 7.7 yards per carry, respectively. And let's just say that comes down a tick when the competition gets more tough. Well, let's just say it comes out a tick. A tick would be TJ Harden rushing for 5 yards a carry and Chris Johnson Jr. as the change of pace back rushing for 5.5. You're more than okay. Now, the question becomes, does Kevin Jennings elevate his level of play once the competition gets stiffer? Remaining to be seen. But the program that Rhett Lashley and Casey Woods are instituting and are running offensively is working. SMU is going to be a team that wants to go on 12-play drives, kill some clock, everybody have 2, maybe 3 possessions per quarter. And you can win like that. And then the defense putting pressure on the quarterback. The defense, I think, has been underrated, especially the front. And what I mean by that is they're making quarterbacks move and they are hard to throw the ball on. SMU's defense has 9 sacks in 3 games. Pretty good. That's pretty good. In terms of TFLs, I don't see it here, but again, they had 9. They had 9 tackles for loss against Missouri State. How they finished the game, and then when you look at the overall product of the game, you're okay. You're okay. If you clean up the discipline issues, you're okay if you're SMU. No, it didn't look fantastic. That reflected in the AP rankings that came out yesterday. We'll talk about that to close up the show. But all in all, you played 3 quarters of really good football, and now we just have to take that final step and make it 4. And remember, SMU season, just because they lost to Baylor, is not dead by any stretch of the imagination. You've got TCU this week. That could, depending on how the Big 12 slate works out, look like a pretty good win. You've got Syracuse 2 weeks from now, and then you're off and running in conference play, and ultimately SMU's best chance to get back to the ACC champion or back to the college football playoff was always to be one of the 2 teams in the ACC championship game. You've got one more non-conference resume elevator on the schedule, and that begins your slate. That really was going to get you back to the CFP or at least to the ACC championship. All's not dead. All is not dead for SMU, and they still have a good formula, and the way they finished the game against Missouri State in the final 3 quarters proves that they still could easily be fine. But they won't be fine if they don't clean up all this nonsense. We'll talk about that next on Locked On SMU. We're brought to you today by the Game Cap. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time, sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, which hat would you be wearing? Yeah, which hat would you be wearing? For me, it would be hats from the game. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage style fans wore back in the 80s and the 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same prices they did back in the day. When you use code LOCKEDON at thegamecaps.com, you will get your vintage hat for $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com, that's thegamecaps.com, to grab your team's classic bar or the retro circle design as well. Use code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount because legends wear the game. We're also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and other nutrients as well, with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love the most is how portable they are. Big taste in a tiny shot that you can take anywhere and get that boost when you need it. Man, I love not only that they're portable, but they're sugar-free too, and it kicks in fast. Now, what does that mean? That means you get your boost, and because there's no added sugars or nothing like that, you don't crash at the end of the afternoon. So enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com, or get them on Amazon today. All right, welcome back to Locked On SMU. Hey, go ahead and subscribe to the channel at Locked On SMU on YouTube. Give me a follow on Twitter at Gray_Singleton2. I post some of the clips from the shows on the Twitter page and on the Twitter page of Locked On SMU as well. Would love to interact with you in all of those. Okay, SMU will be fine if they continue to follow their formula for winning, but they won't be fine if this penalty nonsense continues. And remember this, SMU last season was the most penalized team in the FBS, and they have seemingly followed suit this year, and it has looked miserable at times. I mean, you go back to the start of the East Texas A&M game where they had 8 penalties in the first half. Baylor, they did a little bit better. They weren't as glaring, but they were still there. And now 12 penalties for 130 yards against Missouri State. I mean, my Lord. This is a team that does not play Power 5 teams very well. They haven't in the last 5 years. This is a team that you are athletically and physically superior than, and they can't stop committing penalties. And some of them, quite frankly, some of them are dumb and unnecessary. But they have made it so much harder on themselves because they just can't stop. They can't just be disciplined enough. And I gotta say, for all the good that Rhett Lashley has done, he's made a team that is relevant, that has swag, that has some bite to it. But they are also a bunch of wild cards. I mean, this team literally, whether it's holding, whether it's pass interference, whether it's roughing the passer, whether it's whatever. I mean, if I was going to forecast to you that in a big game, they would have a kickoff return touchdown and it would be called back at a really critical time, you'd be like, yeah, that sounds kind of on brand. Just because this team, for some reason, just isn't disciplined very well. And I think that's something that Rhett Lashley is going to really have to hammer home, because there's not a whole lot of physical and technical stuff that SMU needs to clean up. Maybe a little bit of technical stuff on the defensive backfield, because that's where they're getting some of these penalties. But there's not a whole lot of physical and technical stuff. Like, it's literally up here. It's an upstairs thing that is so mind-boggling. And some of the penalties they commit are just like, how are you doing this? And then you combine that with the fact that you've got Romello Brinson fumbling because he's switching hands in the middle of the field after having it in the inside hand way too long. It just doesn't look right. And I think that's ultimately the culprit as to why SMU has lost confidence with the AP voters. I'll give you the exact number to close up the show. But one of the reasons they keep slipping and one of the reasons they don't get a whole lot of grace after that Baylor game is because this looks like a team that steps on its own feet, because they just can't sustain a whole lot, because they, set themselves back. 12 for 130 is nuts. It's nuts. And Rhett Lashley talked about this in his media availability after last week's game. He's like, we would like to have less penalties. But you know what else is strange too? I just looked this up. SMU only had 6 penalties for 64 yards against Baylor, or 6 penalties for 55 yards against Baylor. You can live with that. Against the team that you got to rev it up for and you're going to have a great environment for, you played a little bit more discipline. But against East Texas A&M, you got 8 in the first half, and against Missouri State, you got 12. You know what that tells me? That's a lack of focus. That's a lack of focus. It's sleepwalking. The East Texas A&M game was the first game of the season. It's going to be a little bit rocky and a little haphazard. I get it. But this one was an 11 a.m. game. You're on the road. You got to see what the team is made of, and you come out there and look undisciplined and unwound. It's a lack of focus. So look, maybe the team is hyper-focused against TCU, and maybe the team is hyper-focused all through conference play, and you start to sit in the 6 to 8 penalty range for the entire game. If that's the case, then we probably will not have another segment about this again for the rest of the season. But if there are times when the going gets tough, attrition starts to set in, early or late game, and, it's just one of those things where you may not just be feeling it on all cylinders, and you revert back to this nonsense, it could cost you. Because SMU, I will say this, even though they won the game, with all those penalties yesterday, they made themselves look like a really rocky team. They made themselves look like a 2-1 team that has beaten East Texas A&M and Missouri State and lost the only game to a team with, some substance in terms of competing with the best of the best. That's your resume. Your resume is look choppy against a far inferior team, blow a lead to a team that might be our equal in terms of status in the Power 5, Power 4. And then we beat another team, great, but we get off to a horrible start and then can't get out of our own way the rest of the way. That's what they look like right now. And as it pertains to Rhett Lashley, this has to be a tighter ship. I know a player's coach when I see it, and that is a player's coach. But this has to be a tighter ship because something isn't adding up as to why they keep stepping on their own feet in the strangest of ways. They have to get the discipline thing down because you got through last year's schedule being the highest penalized team in the FBS a season ago. Look, Clemson looks like they're not the same Clemson. People have sold their Clemson stock. But Miami's on that schedule, and Miami looks like a team that could win a natty. They really, really do. Clemson could still very well beat you on their home turf. You want to play the big dogs? Be buttoned up like the big dogs. And that's what it comes down to. Coming up next, speaking of the big dogs, SMU isn't one of them in the top 25. All is not lost, but this isn't a good trend. We'll talk about that to close up shop. Coming up. Hey, let's talk about PrizePicks. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off for you. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means making money. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 ticks. And the best part is, even if one of your picks misses, PrizePicks has invented what's called the flex play, so you can still double your money as well. All you got to do, click that flex play, and if one is wrong, you're still going to win some money. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play, whether it wins or loses. PrizePicks, it's just good to be right. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use any way you want across the app. And again, FanDuel is one of those great places to play because there's a diversity of ways that you can bet. Same game parlay, build some player props, jump in as live action is unfolding with the live bets. You can do it all. Y'all know me, I love my player props. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. But when you win, boy, you can cash in big with those player props and building a parlay with those. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place just $5 for your first bet. Closing it up here on Locked On SMU on a Monday as we start a new week. SMU coming off of a 28-10 victory over Missouri State. Now, the story that came out on Sunday, and I'm recording this on Sunday night, is that SMU has fallen even further away from the top 25. They just have. And I'm going to pull it up for you right now. In terms of ACC teams, let's tackle this for a second. Florida State is number 7. Georgia Tech is 18. Clemson has dropped all the way out of the rankings. Clemson, by the way, get this. Clemson got 6 votes in the AP poll. Now, here's where we get to SMU. Because the Mustangs got 4. Last week, I believe it was 26 that SMU got. They got 4. 4 votes. And that's coming off of a win. This is why, two things here. Number one, even style points matters. And how you go about your business matters. Not just that you took care of it. You know, something we've heard in life all the time. The path to getting somewhere does matter. And when it comes to the AP votes, the path to how you win matters. And quite frankly, it just wasn't impressive in its totality. You fall behind 10-0, turn the ball over twice in the process. Even though your next 3 quarters were pretty good, borderline excellent, you had the penalties and you had the bad start. And that's going to jade everything and cast a shadow over the W that you got. Also, keep this in mind, too. SMU's resume does not look that good as of right now because your wins are against East Texas A&M and Missouri State. Your losses to Baylor, who isn't even a ranked team, and still isn't a ranked team, even though they got 6 votes in the most recent AP poll that came out yesterday. So, nothing on SMU's resume is going to stand out. And the reason this is a problem, even though it's not going to be a death sentence as of right now, the reason that's a problem is because these rankings are trendy. And if you look at once the transition happens between the AP rankings and then the college football playoff rankings later in the year, the college football playoff rankings do not differentiate but so much from the AP, right? It's not as if the AP is going to have a team at 23 the week before the college football playoff rankings take over, and then the college football playoff committee is going to have that team at 10. Because these things are trendy. There's not a whole lot of big jumps and big drops. I mean, take a look at this. So 1, 2, and 3 stayed put in college football this week. The biggest drop was Notre Dame dropping 16 spots, but Notre Dame lost their opening game, had a week off, and then is now 0-2 after losing to Texas A&M. Outside of them, which is a kind of an outlier here because of that path, outside of them, the biggest drop or rise was 6, and that was Texas A&M, who is proving that they were underranked. Otherwise, there isn't that much movement when it comes to the really good teams, especially once the really good teams start playing the other really good teams. So you need to be in position to get to catch people's eye and to draw those eyeballs and have people paying attention well before the college football playoff committee starts to take over. Now, here's the good news on the flip side. The good news is that SMU's schedule is going to allow them to do just that, because the schedule is not all terrible. Now you've got a run of, well, now that Clemson is unranked, you've got a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unranked teams. Even though even a win against Clemson on the road is still going to say something, right? But with the way that college football has transpired now, up to this point, it is very clear that SMU is going to have to take all its matters into its own hands. Everything has to be in control, and you've got to control your controllables if you're going to get back to the college football playoff, because Clemson does not, at least right now, seem like the resume enhancer that it would otherwise be in most other years, just because they just don't look that good, quite frankly. So you're still going to have to go on the road to beat them. But other than that, it's at TCU, who I believe was pretty close to getting into the top 25, if I can find it again. TCU was, there we go, wrong tab. They got 67 votes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're basically the number 30 team in the country. So TCU's going to give you something. And then Louisville, if they hold serve with the rest of their schedule, Louisville should give you something because they're not that far back from TCU. So you've got 2 games there with schools that are considered above you in technicality, right? We're basically doing technicalities here. So that could bode in your favor. But other than that, you have to win those games. You have to win the Miami game. And you have to, if you're talking about getting back to the college football playoff, you have to get to the ACC championship game. Especially with the way Georgia Tech and the way Florida State look, they're going to be the teams that get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and get judged a little less harshly. But you have to force your way in. And a conference runner-up that ran the table, if SMU runs the table, goes 11-1, even I think if they go 10-2 and lose the conference championship to what could be a highly ranked Miami or a highly ranked Georgia Tech or a highly ranked Florida State, you have given yourself an outside chance. You've given yourself that chance. But I think the best way for them to do so, if they don't win the ACC championship game, would be to run the table in the regular season. And I know I'm saying something that sounds pretty obvious, but the situation is dire because they keep falling. These rankings are trendy, and the resume right now doesn't look very good. And the opportunities that we might have thought they would have to enhance that resume have sort of dissipated to this point in time. But again, all is not lost. It's not panic time just yet, but they got to make moves. They got to be better. They got to look better doing it, by the way, and button up the other stuff. But everything is still out in front of SMU. They've got the talent. They've got the formula. Just clean up some stuff, win some games, and they'll be back in the conversation. All right, that'll do it for Locked On SMU here on a Monday. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen of the day. Hey, check out Locked On's College Football Kickoff. Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation along two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. So catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the year only on Fire TV. We'll talk to you tomorrow on a Tuesday here on Locked On SMU. Take it easy, everybody.